Welcome to Pixel Realms, the podcast where two geeks dive headfirst into the gaming multiverse. They're basically like Gandalf in a headset, minus the wisdom and magic. So, grab your snacks and level up your patience. Pixel Realms, where the pixels are real, but the knowledge, not so much.
This is Pixel Realms, episode 11. Has early access games taken over AAA gaming? Well, we're about to talk about it. I'm your host, Mark, and this is
Joe.
And yeah, so early access games, Joe. What do we got? What do you got? What do you feel?
Well, okay, before we jump into that, I thought you had some Nintendo Switch news to potentially talk about quick.
None of it's confirmed, so I'm not gonna dig into it or anything. I haven't even looked deep into it, but I'm guessing the rumor is that we're gonna get some kind of announcement this month, and somebody is starting to leak things online. Whether it's real or not, Nintendo has always been secretive. So even if the leaks are true, they're not going to admit it. I don't think they've ever admitted it. Maybe once in a very rare blue moon have they ever admitted when a leak comes out and be like, yeah, okay, blah blah blah. But the only kind of sort of confirmed rumor that people are feeling is true is that there's might be some kind of Nintendo news this month, because the Switch 2 is still supposed to come out sometime this year. So, well, I guess we'll see if Nintendo finally hits us with the news, because I know everyone's been waiting for it.
Well, it's been talked about for a very long time. I think
years, 2 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say about 2 years is when the rumors started coming out that maybe Nintendo has been working on a Switch 2, and then the rumor was the Switch Pro, which ended up being the OLED version of the Switch for the most part. And so what I've seen so far from the leak is that the controls are going to be slightly different. Obviously, the processor, the graphics are going to be a little bit more powerful. The dock's going to be changed a little bit more, but the form factor, from what the leaks are showing, looks about the same. There have been some patent stuff that people were able to look at from Nintendo. So there may be a little bit of truth to it. Again, as Mark said, Nintendo's very big on keeping silent and not really showing off too much about what may or may not be true. When they release press releases about stuff like this, it's typically like, well, nothing official has been announced, which is a smart tactic, because they're not even saying yes or no. They're just saying, well, nothing's official's out. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I know we talked about the Switch 2 not too long ago, about what we're hoping it would be and what it may be. And obviously, once we have something official from Nintendo, we will cover it on this podcast.
Yep. And the only other thing that has partially come out is the rumored price point, which, to no one's surprise, it's probably going to be about $400. I think it's the rumored price is 399 euros, which I think, if I did the translation correct, it was a little over $400. So I imagine the Switch 2 is probably going to be priced at $399.99 US dollars,
which is a jump from the Switch 1. Now, keep this in mind for everyone who's like, wow, that's crazy more expensive. Well, the reason why the Switch 1 was at the price tag it was is because Nvidia had a surplus of extra chips, and they had no one to give it to. And Nintendo's like, sure, we'll take them off your hands for a massive discount. And that's how the Switch ended up becoming, what was it, $299 at launch, I think it was. So obviously that's not going to happen this time around, because Nvidia and Nintendo, I don't even know if Nvidia is even working on the chips for the Switch 2, but if they are, it's probably a custom chip this time around.
I mean, and to be fair, I kind of, it might be, the price isn't confirmed anyways. That's just a rumor. I feel like the $399.99 is probably pretty accurate, but I could even see it being $349.99, being about $350, that would make it about $100 more expensive than the original Switch, I think, which is still quite a bit cheaper than your current consoles. I believe the PlayStation 5 is the disc version. I think is cheaper than the digital, or maybe it's vice versa.
I think the digital's cheaper.
The digital version is about 300. I think it's either $350 or $400, and the disc version is about $450, $500 still. So the Switch 2 would still be cheaper than your PS5 and your versions. And I don't know about Xbox. I don't even know Xbox price. I'm assuming it's around the same price as PlayStation. Who knows? But no one gives a shit about Xbox anyway.
If Nintendo wants to make people at least somewhat supportive of the price tag, the big thing in their official announcement needs to be backwards compatibility with the Switch 1. Simple as that. If they go digital, only digital, but if they go, the discs the little cartridges as well, that'd be awesome for those who own it. But I would understand if they only go digital backwards compatibility, just because, if they want to switch over to different cartridge itself. But that would be a huge selling point for the price tag.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's backwards compatible. Like, I think that's a no-brainer. I think obviously, again, nothing's confirmed, but Nintendo's really good about that, especially in the recent the last 10 years or plus or whatever, making something better. I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a no-brainer. Supposedly, the most current news that I'm seeing on Twitter is that Thursday might be there might be an announcement from Nintendo. The current, so we'll keep our eyes on January 16th, Thursday, and see if it comes true. If it is, then one of our podcasts will probably talk about it. But we'll see. I don't believe anything until it comes out officially from Nintendo, but I am seeing a lot of stuff on Twitter right now, pictures of like the supposed cartridges being just a slight smidge different than the original Switch. The controller is slightly different. I just hope that they fix the Joy-Con drift. Like that's the only thing I want from a Switch controller. The Joy-Cons were fine. I mostly played with the Pro Controller anyways, or I played with it as a portable. So I very rarely messed with the Joy-Cons, but when I did, the Joy-Con drift was the issue most of the time. So if they fix that, I don't give it, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, I think the Joy-Cons would be really, really good. And I feel like the Switch ones were kind of like early access. Just like the topic we're getting into for this episode.
I'm leaving.
Early access games. Now, Mark and I are a little bit, I think, different when it comes to early access games. I feel you're a bit more on board with it than I am in certain games, of course, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with early access games, especially if it's games that I want to play. Like there's no doubt, like I don't mind it. I'm playing Hades 2, which is in early access. I played Baldur's Gate 3 when it was in early access. I'm currently playing the current MMO that I'm playing. Pantheon is in early access and it's not slated to be officially out for at least another year or two. So it's going to be quite a while of early access. So I have no problem with early access as long as there is actual progression and a end goal. And I'm not going to go as far as to say they have to have a date announced with like this is the end goal date that it's coming out as, but they have to have at least it be a fairly clear goal. I don't like it when a game comes out in early access and they seemingly have no direction. It feels like that, and then it's fishing for money. Or the games such as Star Citizen, or that will be in early access probably forever unless it came out and I just never heard the official release date.
No, nothing yet. It's been in early access for a decade.
And then didn't we just get 2 games this past year that came out that have been in quote unquote early access for like 10 plus years. I know.
Ready or Not was or in early access for a few years.
Yeah, well, 7 Days to Die,
7 Days to Die,
can
yeah.
had been in early access forever, and I think Satisfactory was another game that was in early access for a while, and I think they just had their 1.0 in recent months. I could be wrong.
It'd be interesting how the developer decides that the game is ready. Like, obviously, they have some sort of a drawing board of what the final content will be, but I know they're just sometimes the community will add ideas and they can add features in or add, whatever it be to the game itself, and it can go on forever. It could be a brand new game at that point, or it could be just, new characters, new maps, new whatever. I think of like Ready or Not. I remember I was on board Ready or Not pretty early on, and in the initial days of Ready or Not, I felt like there was more customizability in the game than what the final 1.0 ended up becoming. And for good and bad, like the 1.0 is very stable, does its job. It's a great game. But I feel like there was just a few more things I could do with the early access versions than I can do in today's version.
Yeah, I guess like I said, it's like I hate to compare these two, but early access gaming for me is almost like a relationship where communication's the key for me. Just like a healthy like relationship with a partner, where the you want to stay communicative. Not having communication is when a relationship is doomed to end. It's sort of the same way with an early access game. As long as the developers, now they don't have to be in our DMs obviously and be like, "Hey besties, like this is the the weekly update or this is the hourly update," but like I'd say once every couple weeks or at least once a month they need to have some kind of like, even if it's just a mini update, just to touch base with its player base, being like, look, this is what we are currently working on. We don't have a time frame for it, but we're focusing on this thing, etc. And if they are considering doing changes, they need to be upfront with their the people backing it, because then you get into fraudulent territory. I mean, there's another game right now, another MMO that I've had my eyes on for a while called Ashes of Creation, and there's a lot of people that are calling it a scam game where the devs have been kind of really slow on things, and then they changed a whole bunch of things, and then they put out some content, and the fans weren't happy, so they went back to the drawing board and was supposedly listening to their fans, but then there's been some other stuff and some other talks, and it's just like, and that was $100 buy-in for a quote unquote early access game. So you got that. I remember several years ago, I paid it might have been $150 for the early access, essentially early access founders pass alpha, whatever, for an MMO called Arcade. I loved Arcade in alpha. It was an amazing game, and then something happened. Like it went into beta, and then into release, and somewhere between alpha and beta, the game suddenly overnight, seemingly completely changed for the worse. And then by the time it came out and released a couple weeks or a month later, it was a different game than what I had paid my $150 for, and I was no longer getting the game that I paid for.
And so that's interesting you bring that up, because some people think of early access as only like an indie studio, right? But that's not always the case. And one example of that is Epic. Epic launched Fortnite in early access, and Fortnite was initially only a horde zombie kind of game. It was Save the World, I think is what the mode is called. And essentially you build up a fort, you protect whatever, and zombies come and are trying to destroy that, and eventually time runs out and you either survive or you don't. And I was one of those early access people. I bought it for whatever it was, $30, and I had a blast. I put so many hours into it, played with my nephew in the game, and it's just a glorious time. And then Epic found out that well, that mode's really cool and it works, but we're not getting the people we want. How about we do a PvP Call of Duty style thing, with an artsy colors and aimed it more for kids? And bam, blockbuster hit. Every
Yeah.
child on planet Earth who has a PC, console, Switch, whatever it be, plays Fortnite.
Yeah, and the thing is I don't think there's really like a time frame either on early access. You've got games like Darkest Dungeon or Slay the Spire that spent like a year in early access and then came out, and they were amazing games. And then you got I think games like Ark, which Ark has been around a while now, but it was in early access for like 2 years. And then hell, even I believe Subnautica was in early access for a couple of years. With it was in early access with Fortnite. Both of those games were like 3 years. And then I didn't even realize it had been 4 years, but apparently Rust was in early access for 4 years.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Rust,
forget about Rust, yeah.
Yeah, and then remember DayZ? Remember when DayZ was a thing? And that was early access for like 5 years, and then didn't that whole thing didn't it change? Like it's not even DayZ anymore.
Yeah, it's completely different. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you get circumstances like that where it doesn't even turn out to be the same damn game. So it's kind of interesting seeing where things go. Sometimes they turn out better than you expect. Sometimes they turn out worse than you expect. So yeah.
And so with early access, one of the big things is that the community, like Mark was talking about earlier. Obviously, the developer needs to communicate with the players, but the players also need to provide information to the developer, because early access is very unique compared to, let's say, a traditional AAA game where you have a studio of whatever 100 people working on a title, and they already have a storyboard, they already have the gameplay mechanics, all that set in stone. All they're doing now is just making it happen. Whereas early access, the developer has a concept of an idea, and they get enough things going to where you can actually play that concept. And now they're getting the feedback from the community. What was that? Valheim is a great example of a game that came out with a great concept, and thanks to the community, helped drive it to become an even more successful title.
It's funny you say that. I was actually going to mention that in a few minutes. Like Valheim was a big one. Like you said, Ready or Not. Pow World was granted. I don't think it spent a long time in early access, but Pow World's done incredibly well in the short amount of time it's been out, and that was a early access release first before its official launch. I'm looking at Steam has an early access section where you can click on it and see games that are in early access. Lethal Company is a very, very successful streamer game. You see, for last year or the year before, especially, it dominated Twitch streams, especially with collaborations with people getting together and streaming together. There was tons of Lethal Company things going on, and that one's early access. Path of Exiles right now is Path of Exiles 2 is in early access, and I know that's doing really well. There's quite a few. That was just a couple to name a few. I know. I think Phasmophobia, which I think has been out like 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, I think that was early access. Yeah,
I think it's still early access.
A game that
it's made huge changes.
A game that you and I are interested in is Manor Lords, which really looks awesome. That's an early access title, and the developer continues to add features to it and make it better and whatnot. And see, the thing is that with early access, obviously there's a few titles out there that are unique and how they're produced, right? Manor Lords is not that. It's not a unique title. It's it's a strategy type game. There's been millions of them. But what the community can do is provide ideas that can make it unique. And that's
another
the
one I
selling
just
point.
realized? Holy crap. Project Zomboid is still in early access.
It's
been out since 20, 2023
Jeez.
is when it initially came out, and it still says on the Steam page early access game.
Now, early access games don't need to be huge games either.
No,
So I
no,
know
absolutely not.
you've played quite a few of the little simulator type things at the supermarket one.
TCG, yep, TCGs technically is a early access game.
And we're not saying those are we're not saying those are, super easy to make by any means, but they're a simple concept.
No.
You run a grocery store, you run a you run a fast food
Supermarket,
place,
yep.
Card store, whatever it be. The idea is there. It's real life. Now you're just doing it virtually,
So
And
with those games, I do want to say that like those are those are the ones that you gotta kind of watch out for, because they're usually small companies that are doing it.
Yeah, 2 or 3 people, just friends doing it or something.
Yeah, and I've seen some of them kind of almost completely not disappear per se, but kind of get abandoned. So like they'll get put out in early access. People will pay to play it. And which you're usually not paying more than $10 to $20, so it's not a big loss, but it's still like, you'll get enough people buying the game where they'll get a nice influx of money, and they like, well, that's all we're gonna do with this game. Next, and then they'll just call it done.
Sometimes it's not always the developer's fault though. Sometimes it's
No, it's true.
They come up with an idea, they push that idea out, but their skill set isn't enough to finish some things.
Yep, you're right.
I'm one of those people for sure. Like I can produce a video in Adobe Premiere, I can work on Audition, but I can't do a lot of things that other people can do. So when I have an idea for a video, sometimes I can't make that idea into reality because I lack the skill set to do that. And it's no different than with a game. They may have the idea, they know how to use Blender, they know how to get the sound effects going, but then sometimes they don't know how to get the animation working properly to work with this because someone suggested that. And, all of a sudden they're like, oh, hell, I guess I give up. I can't do it anymore. Or even the community is so aggressive against them. Maybe they're negative. Oh, this game sucks. You need to add this. This game sucks because you got to add that. And they don't want that negativity.
No, absolutely. There's a ton of reasons why a game can get abandoned, but I guess my big feeling is that a lot of times in those situations you don't get them coming out and saying, "Hey, because of blah blah blah, we're moving on," or we're gonna have to call this game done or whatever. Like very rarely, if ever, have I seen that happen. It's usually like in the case of, I don't have any games per se that I can say. There's one game series that I can't remember. It's not a series. I can't remember the dev's name, but you and I talked about it when we were finding games to play, like Enshrouded. But it wasn't Enshrouded. But there were games like Enshrouded that were getting put out by a company where they would essentially do a game.
Yeah, the Bellwright guys.
Yeah, the people who did Atlas, I believe it was called. Wasn't it Atlas or?
Let me see. Bellwright's done by Donkey Crew.
I want to say
Ark. Well, they did Ark.
I want to say it was the.
Atlas. Yeah, they did Atlas.
Yeah, and not the cutesy one that's on Steam right now. With like a little fox character. There's a. I'm trying to remember the damn name of it. Is it Atlas Fallen now or something? Rain of Sand, some shit like that.
I think it is Atlas. I think that's who you're talking about. Snail Games.
Yes.
Pirates thing. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think it was them.
Well, it's sitting there at mixed reviews on Steam right now.
But didn't they do? They're doing a couple of different series, right? Like they've come up with a couple different games. I'm trying to remember.
Well, Ark and Bellwright, Zombie Within.
Okay, maybe it's not them. There's because I don't want to. No, it's not. No, okay, yeah, Atlas. No, there's one game. I'm not gonna stay on it for too long. I can't remember the name of it. There was a game that was kind of like a
Vasto Oasis they also did, which is mostly negative and mixed. I think it's them. I think it's Donkey Crew and Snail Games.
It might be. It might be. I just know that. Yes. 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 Because Last Oasis is the one I was thinking of. The survival. Yep. It was. So it's either Donkey Crew or Snail Games. But I mean, they if it's Donkey Crew, they did Ark, and Ark is huge, and Ark is still going, and they're doing Ark 2, and they've had a lot of success. So maybe or maybe that's Snail Games. I don't know. One of the companies has a bad track record of releasing a game, kind of not finishing it, and then moving on.
And I think that,
I can't remember.
that could be multiple reasons. So I'm going to play the devil advocate here a little bit, but it could be that they overshot their abilities. They did successful. We're just going to say it's Donkey Crew or Snail Games, whatever it be. They came up with Ark. Ark was a big hit,
No, I
super
think it
successful.
is. I think it is.
Then they decided to try something else, realized that, oh, well, this concept kind of sucks, and then they just abandoned the game, right?
Last Oasis.
Yeah.
It's Last Oasis, Atlas, and Dark and Light. They did 3 games in that survival RPG kind of genre. And they were 3 different types. One was more fantasy based, one was more nomadic and kind of dealing with like open world, and it was like sandy and rocky and whatever. And then you have like Atlas, which was the ship one. And all 3 of those games were big for monkish question mark. And then they kind of were like, and then moved on.
And so that's obviously the big issue when it comes to early access is you may never see a final product. And for me, one of the big things, at least, that if I'm willing to spend the money on early access, is I want to know at least at the bare minimum. So my rule with games is as long as I can get $1 per hour of gameplay. So if the game is $10, I want to be able to get at least 10 hours into it. $20, 20 hours, etc. That's my base rule with games. So if an early access game is $15, as long as I can get 15 solid, decent gameplay hours, not talking about loading and stuff like that, but 15 hours worth of gaming with it, I'm content enough with it, because that's how I judge my AAA games as well, in terms of, is it beneficial to me for the price I paid? There are exceptions to that rule, of course. I think I talked about this before, but that's kind of my big thing is. And early access games, I keep it to that same standard because I understand that some of them, you don't have endless amounts of gameplay. Some do, open world ones, of course. You may have the ability to explore so much more and do things. But the thing with the open world is, okay, sure, you have an entire world. What can you do in that world, though? What keeps you sucked in to actually want to do more? Is there a story? Is there unique side quests? Is the world cool? Is it just boring? Is it layers to the world? Is there mountains and then underground stuff? So there has to be more than just walking around and collecting loot, walking around and collecting rocks and stuff to build houses. Like, okay, why am I building this house? What is the concept of this? So that is, I think, some of the issues that early access games run into is they make these large environments, but they're boring as hell. And that's happened a lot with AAA games recently.
Yep. I agree. Like, if I get my money's worth, then even if the game never finishes, even if the game never fully comes out, whatever, then I can't really complain, and I don't really complain about it. Like, as much as I was very upset with what happened with Arcade, with the amount of money that I put into it, rightfully so, but I would say, whether I like to admit it or not, that I probably got my $150 worth, because I was no-lifing that game for a good, decent amount of time. So I could argue that the game wasn't what I bought into. The end product wasn't what I bought into, but also I played it for a long time where I probably got my $150 worth. So at the end of the day, it's like I could choose to be pissed off all the time, or I can, move on with my life and be like, well, it's not the game I paid for, but I played it for so long and for so many hours that I probably got my money's worth. And that's how I kind of see everything now. The only thing that I really kind of learned from Arcade is not to buy the big like foundery type packs and stuff. Like I have no problem spending $15-$20 on an early access game. Still, I just won't pay, for these MMOs where it's like, give them $100 to buy in, give them, $50, give them $75. It's like, nah, I'll wait and see if I get a beta key or an alpha key since I sign up for all of those. Or, in Pantheon's instance, your cousin gave me, because when he bought into the game, it included a second key. And since I'm the only one who really plays MMOs with him, he gave me the key. And even still, when they put it out on Steam, I think it's $30 or $40, which is not a bad price for what's an MMO buying. Yeah, $39.99. Now, I know it's eventually going to have a subscription when it goes live in 2-ish years, but that's 2 years from now. And considering I play World of Warcraft, every expansion that comes out is $40, $50 plus dollars, plus you're paying your $15 a month. I'm not going to bitch about a game that is getting quality work done. It's a small team. They're not a big team. There's one of their lead guys, one of their devs, is streams. He's streaming, the content so people can go and watch the stream and see, what the game's turning into over the long run. And he constantly is giving people, talking about the game, giving minor updates, whatever. So, that's it. That's a situation where the developer is being very communicative with the community.
Yeah, and there's Mark and I have played Enshrouded. We have about 30 hours into it, and in that 30 hours, we had some decent experience with it, and then we also had some frustration moments.
Oh yeah,
And towards the end there, they added finally the ability to adjust the difficulties, and that's kind of one thing that we were hoping for earlier on. Is
yeah.
we're
Because
not
sometimes you'd be
people.
really, sometimes it'd be really easy, and then the difficulties, especially if you were even just a single tier behind in either upgrading the overall, I guess, base or your gear. Like if you weren't like, if you got behind, the difficulty would spike and they would slap our shit. And it was very, very frustrating because it was one of the type of games where before they changed it, you die and you drop your stuff.
Yeah,
And then
it's
you have
gone
to
forever.
do
You
a
gotta go get
course
it.
run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which really, the concept's fine as long as it's an enjoyable experience. And we were
Yeah.
just getting so furious with it. Mark would rage quit a couple different times as well as I did. And, once they finally added the ability to, adjust difficulty and stuff like that, by that time, it's kind of wore off. The experience
Yeah.
wore off. The
Yeah.
world didn't seem as interesting anymore because we already experienced it and had some not so great times with it when it
Yeah.
came to some of the NPCs.
That one
Um,
dungeon that we did, that
no,
we finally got to the boss, and it was
we
underwhelming. I was,
yeah, but the game was fine. It's just if the game had the difficulty settings in the beginning, I
Mhm.
think we would have probably put in 60 plus hours into it by this time.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's like, well, we'll explore it every few months to see what updates might have happened to it. But I don't think it's something we'll go back to consistently unless something major changes
Well,
that brings us interest.
yeah, or we could even do, we could just, we've experienced the game in its current, form. Maybe, and I'm not saying that we'll do this or not or whatever, but like maybe we don't touch it again until release. And we're not saying that we're not going to,
Yeah.
but maybe we life gets in the way and we just don't get back to it till release. And then when we go back to it, the game feels new again because they've added enough stuff that we didn't try out in early access, plus with the changes to the game that we wanted finally being implemented. Maybe it'll feel like a new experience. I know I played Power World right before it came out, and then obviously the launch. You did not, so you never experienced Power World. I did everything that I could do in Power World at the time. That was before they released their first raid. There's been a ton of content that has come out since then, and I'm still not like ready to jump back in yet because I still put in a decent number of hours. But down the line, you know, maybe sometime this year, maybe in a year or two, I'll go back to that game and it'll be new again because they'll have added so much new content that maybe it'll be a whole new experience. I have 120 hours in Power World, 120, and that was basically before the full release. So, you know, especially like say I find to talk Joe into playing it, or if I get other people to play it with me, and then, you know, we revisit it when it's like a full, like, you know, several releases in, you know, kind of thing, you know, so there's all kinds of opportunities. Another great example, Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah. When I played Baldur's Gate 3, Act 1 wasn't even finished yet. Some of the characters weren't in the game yet. All the classes weren't in the game yet. All the spells. There was so much that wasn't in the game, and I still put in, I'd say, a good 10 to 15 hours and was experiencing things. And then I got what I wanted out of the early access, and I stopped right before they started adding a bunch of the classes and a bunch of the features. And I basically stopped until the game came out. And what happened? I put almost basically 400 hours once it came out. And now they're coming out with a huge patch soon that's going to add tons of new content while still playing the same game. Because they're not adding new content in the sense that they're not really adding new quests, new story modes, that kind of stuff. But they're adding enough newness with the classes and adding subclasses that I can easily see myself putting in at least another 100 hours in, because there's tons of subclasses that I want to try and see how they work and see what they do with it. The story's still going to be the same, but at the same time, Baldur's Gate 3 is such an amazing game that I'm still finding new shit whenever I play it. I'll browse the Reddit, you know, for Baldur's Gate 3, and people will say, you know, blah, 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 I was 300 hours in when I could do this, and I'll read it and be like, holy shit, I didn't know you could do that. I'm still finding that stuff. Like, it's crazy. And that's an instance of early access done right.
Absolutely. So ultimately, early access games, there are pluses to it for sure. There is also major question marks that will stand in the way of how things go forward. I'm really hoping that AAA games do not consistently access early access titles for themselves, because when it comes to AAA gaming, you're paying a premium price for the base game. And then there's, as Mark was saying earlier, there's these levels of packages you can potentially get that AAA games really love to throw out there. You know, get the collector's super edition for $150, where the base game is $70.
Founders edition, so you can get your name in the credits, maybe, or blah blah blah. At least that's with Kickstarters, I guess. But you get the
same
point.
Thing, yeah. So hopefully AAA games kind of stay out of that. There is opportunity there for some AAA games to maybe dive into it. Some people maybe would want AAA games to jump into it because, you know, then maybe games will be flushed out more. But when they make millions of dollars off these games and then say, oh, okay, it's good enough, and then just end it, well, then you may be questioning that decision.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that is very important as a gamer that you need to do is, if you are thinking about getting into a game that you know is coming out in early access or is having an early access release, maybe do a little research. Unless you know for sure that it's the kind of game that you want to play. Because, like for me, example, I'm kind of a pot calling the kettle black here. I don't do my research, but a lot of the times now, the early access games that I buy are those like early access simulator games where it's like, I'm going to plop down my $12.99 or my $20 or my $15 or whatever, and I'll get my whatever hours out of the game. And then if the game gets dumped, oh well. If it comes out, if it gets changes, oh well. But like I paid my money, I put in my time, I got what I wanted out of it, and I moved on. But people who don't want to do that, and I highly suggest don't be like me in that case. Like, just do your research. Like if you see games in early access and you might be interested in it, maybe just dig a little deeper. It doesn't have to be, detective work. Dig a little deeper. Just look into the devs, see if there's any kind of news out there that might be questionable. Anything that can maybe trigger a red flag. And if you don't see any red flags, then buy the game, the early access game, and just know that that's what you're getting. You're getting an early access game that either is not done or won't be done, or is essentially a complete game that they just want extra funding for. I feel like some of the like the grocery store game that you and I played quite a bit of, Supermarket Simulator. I think if you go back and play it now, it's relatively different than it was. I haven't played it in a while, but I've seen the updates, and they've added all kinds of shit that used to be what mods were for. I haven't played the card game sim in a while. I don't know if it's had any updates, but I wouldn't be surprised if I load it up tomorrow and it looks a bit different. Pantheon, the MMO that I'm playing, is a very good example of there's a whole zone, a whole other starting zone in the game right now that is not even close to being complete. There's all kinds of zones that aren't in the game yet. There's quests that aren't active yet. There's bugs that we're still finding, tweaks that we're finding and reporting, and on the Discords and to the devs and whatnot. So that's another example of a company that's doing it right. They have a Discord where they post their information, where they want you to post stuff that you find, and where everyone in the community is doing stuff with, if they have a question about something, they'll type it in and see if anyone's talked about it, or they'll submit a thing. I've done so, your cousin's done so. I've read quite a bit of different things. That's another one where it's early access, but the team's being communicative, and there's a community behind it that's all kind of band together in seeing the game eventually become good. But right now is an alpha, is not finished. And that's what you should be considering when you buy into an early access of any kind. You've got a game that's theoretically not finished.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we talked about as much early access as you possibly can on a podcast that's about early access games. Mark, anything else to add to this one?
Oh, no, not at all. I think we pretty much got what we said what we needed to say. Buy the game if you're interested. Do your research if you want to. If it's smart to. But ultimately, just be prepared to, get an incomplete game, and you got to understand that. So yeah, that's it. That's really it.
Don't be a mark. Do your research, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Don't be a mark ever.
Take care, everyone.
Yep, bye-bye.